Another glorious day at Galactic Station Omega 7. And by glorious, I mean mind-numbingly tedious. My name is Quartermaster A, though most beings just call me A, because apparently pronouncing Zephyrian names gives other species headaches. Fair enough, considering our names sound like someone gargling space fuel mixed with quantum static. I've been manning this security checkpoint for exactly 3 cycles now, and let me tell you, scanning DNA samples has all the excitement of watching paint dry on a neutron star. Which, for the record, takes approximately 4,000 years. I've checked. The morning shift started like any other. First through was a klaxon merchant, his forearms juggling travel documents, while his tentacle beard twitched nervously. Standard DNA scan, green light, move along. Nothing unusual there, unless you count the fact that he was smuggling fermented algae paste in his stomach pouches. But hey, that's customs problem, not mine. Next came a family of Regalians, their crystalline skin refracting the station lights into tiny rainbows. Pretty to look at, absolute nightmare to scan. Their DNA structure resembles a mathematical equation, having an argument with itself. Still, the scanner beeped its happy little beep, displayed the standard readout, and off they went to spread their geometric offspring across the galaxy. Then we had the usual parade of mediocrity. A Centaurian diplomat with an ego larger than his home planet. A group of Andromedan tourists who kept taking selfies with everything, including my scanner. Oh, the joy! And let's not forget the vegan traders who insisted on lecturing me about the ethical implications of DNA scanning while simultaneously trying to bribe me with synthetic credits. You know what the worst part about this job is? It's not the boredom, though that's certainly a factor. It's not even the smell, and trust me, when you've got 300 different species passing through daily, the olfactory experience is memorable. No, the worst part is that every single being that approaches this scanner thinks they're special. They all have some sob story, some urgent business, some reason why they should skip the line or get special treatment. Oh, Quartermaster A, they say, I'm late for a very important meeting with the Trade Federation. Or, my grandmother is dying on Kepler-4b and I simply must catch the next transport. My personal favorite was the Plutonian, who claimed his refrigeration unit was malfunctioning and his cargo of ice fish would wilt if he didn't get through immediately. Spoiler alert, Plutonians don't actually eat ice fish. They absorb minerals through their skin, the lying little frost ball. But today something different was happening. The line was moving with unusual efficiency, and I was actually starting to think I might finish my shift without wanting to launch myself out of the nearest airlock. That should have been my first warning. In my experience, when things are going smoothly in space, the universe is just winding up to punch you in the face with something spectacular. And then she walked up. Human female, approximately 1.7 meters tall, with brown hair tied back in what humans call a ponytail, though I've never understood the equine reference since their tails look nothing like actual pony appendages. She wore standard civilian clothing, carried a single travel bag, and moved with the kind of casual confidence that usually meant trouble. But here's the thing about humans. They're weird. Not weird in the I have 17 eyes and communicate through spores way that most species manage. No, humans are weird in a much more subtle, unsettling manner. They smile too much. They make eye contact. They ask personal questions like, how's your day going? As if they actually care about the answer. It's disturbing. This particular human, her identification read, Amy Kowalski, approached my scanner with that typical human swagger. You know, the walk. It says, I belong here, I know exactly what I'm doing, and also I might break something just because I can. Morning, she said cheerfully, placing her palm on the scanner pad. Lovely day for intergalactic travel, isn't it? See? There it is. That human thing where they comment on completely subjective concepts like whether a day is lovely while standing inside a space station that has no actual day-night cycle. But I've learned not to question human logic. It leads to headaches that even Zephyrian medicine can't cure. I activated the scanner, expecting the usual routine. The familiar blue light swept across her palm, the DNA analysis protocols engaged, and then, Nothing. Well, not nothing exactly. The screen flickered, made a sound like a confused mechanical bird, and then displayed something I'd never seen in 3 cycles of checkpoint duty. Species error, impossible. I stared at the display. Then I stared at Amy Kowalski. Then I stared at the display again, hoping it would suddenly make sense or at least change to something reasonable like human caffeine-dependent proceed with caution. Amy looked at the screen, looked at me, and then did something that made my 4 stomach chambers clench with dread. She smiled. Not just any smile. This was the kind of smile that suggested she knew exactly why my scanner was having what appeared to be an existential crisis, and she found it amusing. This was the smile of someone who had been expecting this exact scenario, and was already 3 steps ahead of whatever chaos was about to unfold. "Huh," she said, with the tone of someone commenting on mildly interesting weather. "That's new." New? Lady, in 3 cycles of scanning everything from sentient gas clouds to beings made of living mathematics, I have never, not once, seen a scanner display impossible. Scanners don't do impossible. They do unne. They do classify later. They even occasionally do what the heck is this thing? But impossible. Impossible implies that whatever she is violates the fundamental laws of biology, physics, or reality itself. And she's standing there smiling about it, like she just told a particularly good joke. I did what any rational security officer would do when faced with a scanner malfunction. I turned it off and turned it back on again. The universal solution to technological problems, proven effective across 17 different star systems. The scanner hummed back to life, ran its diagnostic sequence, and cheerfully announced it was ready for operation. Amy Kowalski, still wearing that infuriating smile, helpfully placed her hand back on the scanner pad. Species error, impossible. Right, so much for the tried and true method. Mum, I said, trying to maintain professional composure while my brain cells staged a small revolt. I'm going to need you to step aside while I contact my supervisor. Sure thing, Amy replied, moving to the designated waiting area with all the concern of someone asked to hold an elevator. She even had the audacity to pull out some sort of portable entertainment device and start reading. While my entire understanding of biological classification crumbled around me like a poorly constructed space station, I activated my comm unit. Quartermaster A to Commander Tom Marley. We have a situation at checkpoint 7. Define situation. A, came the commander's voice, already tinged with the weary resignation of someone who dealt with too many situations this cycle. Scanner malfunction, sir. Displaying impossible readings. Impossible how? I glanced at Amy, who appeared to be completely absorbed in whatever humans consider entertainment these days. It literally says impossible, sir, as in, the word impossible is displayed where the species classification should be. A pause. Then, run a secondary scan. Sir, I already tried turning it off and on again. A, run a secondary scan with backup equipment. I sighed, which in Zephyrian sounds like a deflating balloon having an argument with a tea kettle. Yes, sir. I dragged out the backup scanner, a military-grade unit that could supposedly analyze DNA from a single skin cell at 50 meters. Amy watched with interest as I set it up, like she was observing some mildly entertaining street performance. This might take a moment, I told her. No worries, she said. I've got time. The backup scanner was thorough. It hummed, beeped, flashed several different colors, and generally made all the sounds that expensive equipment makes when it wants you to know it's working very hard. Behind us, the line of waiting passengers was getting restless. Centaurian businessman kept checking his chronometer and muttering about missed connections. The Andromedine tourists had moved on to taking pictures of the backup scanner, because apparently everything in the universe was potential social media content. The scanner finished its analysis and displayed its results with a confident little chime. Species error, impossible. By now word was spreading through the line that something unusual was happening. I could see other passengers craning their necks, whispering among themselves and generally engaging in the kind of rubbernecking behavior that's apparently universal across all sentient species. The klaxon merchant had backed up several meters, his tentacle beard now twitching so violently it looked like it was having a seizure. Fascinating, Amy commented, reading the display over my shoulder. 2 for 2. That's got to be some kind of record. Mom, I said, my professionalism starting to crack around the edges like cheap hull plating. Are you aware of any reason why standard biological scanners might be unable to classify your species? She tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, I am human. Yes. I can see that from your identification. And humans are. She paused, as if searching for the right words. Complicated. Complicated. She said it like she was describing the weather or commenting on the quality of station coffee. Meanwhile, I'm standing here with 2 pieces of military-grade scanning equipment that are apparently having simultaneous nervous breakdowns. My comm unit chirped. What's the status on that secondary scan? Same result, sir. Same how? Same as in identical, sir. The backup scanner is also displaying impossible. Another pause. This one longer. I could practically hear Commander Tom Marley's brain grinding through the implications. I want you to secure the area and maintain visual contact with the subject. I'm bringing a science team. Understood, sir. I looked at Amy, who was now observing the growing crowd of nervous passengers, with what appeared to be genuine amusement. Mom, I'm going to need to ask you to remain in the waiting area until my commander arrives. Of course, she said agreeably. Mind if I grab some coffee from that dispenser over there? This might take a while and I haven't had my morning caffeine fix yet. I nodded, mostly because I was running out of standard protocols for dealing with biologically impossible beings who made polite requests for beverages. 15 minutes later, Commander Tom Marley arrived with what looked like half the science department in tow. Dr. Moran, the station's chief xenobiologist, was carrying enough scanning equipment to stock a small laboratory. The good doctor had the wild-eyed look of someone who'd been dragged away from important research to deal with what he probably assumed was faulty equipment. Where's the scanner malfunction? Dr. Moran asked, setting down his equipment with the careful precision of someone handling delicate instruments. There, I pointed to Amy, who waved cheerfully while sipping her coffee. Dr. Moran looked at her, then at me, then at the scanner displays. His expression slowly transformed from professional irritation to scientific curiosity to what I can only describe as barely controlled panic. Has anyone tried a quantum-level DNA analysis? He asked, his voice climbing an octave. Dr. Moran, I said carefully, we've tried 2 different scanners, both military-grade, both giving identical impossible readings. Impossible readings don't exist, Dr. Moran declared, pulling out a device that looked like someone had crossed a medical scanner with a small particle accelerator. There are only insufficient scanning protocols. Amy watched with interest as Dr. Moran set up his equipment. Oh, that's a nice one, she commented. Is that the new Regillian quantum analyzer? I heard they worked out the stability issues with the 3rd-generation models. Dr. Moran stared at her. You're familiar with quantum DNA analysis equipment? I've seen a few, Amy said with a shrug. Humans are curious about that sort of thing. Dr. Moran activated his analyzer. The device hummed with the kind of deep, resonant sound that suggested it was doing very important and very expensive work. Lights flashed in patterns that probably meant something significant to trained xenobiologists. The display showed cascading data streams, molecular diagrams, and what looked like a real-time analysis of Amy's genetic structure. Then everything stopped. The analyzer made a sound like a dying whale mixed with static interference. The display flickered, showed several error messages in languages I didn't recognize, and then settled on a message in standard Galactic. Analysis terminated. Subject exceeds parameters of known biology. Amy took another sip of her coffee. You know, she said, conversationally, I'm starting to think I just break things by existing. This is getting embarrassing. Dr. Moran was staring at his equipment like it had personally betrayed him. Commander Marley was doing that thing where officers try to look calm while their worldview collapses, and I was beginning to suspect that my nice, boring job was about to become significantly more complicated. Ma'am, Commander Marley said slowly, I think we need to have a longer conversation. Within an hour, what started as a routine scanner malfunction had escalated into what I can only describe as organized chaos, with a side of bureaucratic panic. Word had spread through the station faster than a plasma leak, and suddenly everyone with a rank higher than mine was very interested in Amy Kowalski and her impossible biology. The first sign that this situation had moved beyond my pay grade was when Admiral Vashi's personal transport docked at the station. Admiral Vashi didn't visit Omega-7 for routine matters. The last time she'd set foot on our station was during the Great Cafeteria Incident of 2030-87, when a diplomatic dinner had accidentally started a trade war between 3-star systems. That was resolved with extensive apologies and complimentary desserts. Somehow I doubted this situation would be quite so simple. Amy, meanwhile, had been relocated to what Commander Marley diplomatically called comfortable detention. In reality, it was one of the station's VIP quarters, complete with a fully stocked kitchen, entertainment center, and a view of the local nebula that travel magazines consistently rated as breathtaking. Amy seemed to appreciate the accommodations. "This is nice," she said, testing the softness of the furniture. "Do you happen to have room service? I could really go for something that isn't synthesized protein paste." I stared at her. Here was a being whose very existence apparently violated the fundamental laws of biology, and she was worried about meal quality. "Mum, this is a detention facility, a very comfortable detention facility," Amy corrected. "And I'm guessing I'm going to be here for a while, so we might as well make the best of it. Do you think they have anything with actual spices? Human taste buds are pretty adaptable, but we do appreciate flavor complexity." Before I could respond, my comm unit buzzed with an emergency priority signal. "All senior staff to conference room Alpha immediately. Code Yellow protocols in effect." Code Yellow. That meant potential threat to galactic security. In 3 cycles of service, I'd never seen a Code Yellow that wasn't followed by several cycles of paperwork and at least one diplomatic incident. I looked at Amy, who was now examining the entertainment system's menu options. "Mum, I need..." "Go ahead," she said without looking up. "I'll be fine. Oh, and if you could mention that room service thing to whoever's in charge, I'd appreciate it. I'm thinking something with vegetables. Real ones, not the reconstituted kind." Conference room Alpha was packed. Admiral Vashi sat at the head of the table, her expression suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. Commander Marley was present, along with Dr. Moran, who looked like he'd been running on stimulants and pure scientific curiosity for the past several hours. But the presence that made my stomach chambers clench was Judge Quintara, the station's senior legal authority. When Judge Quintara showed up, someone was either getting promoted or prosecuted, and given the circumstances, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be promotions. "Quartermaster A," Admiral Vashi said as I entered. "You're the officer who first encountered the subject." "Yes, ma'am. Standard checkpoint duty. Routine DNA scan resulted in an error message stating impossible. And subsequent scans confirmed this result?" "Yes, ma'am. Multiple scanners, including Dr. Moran's quantum analyzer, all returned similar impossible readings." Judge Quintara leaned forward. "Dr. Moran, in your professional opinion, what are we dealing with?" Dr. Moran consulted his datapad, though I suspected he could recite the information from memory by now. "The subject's biological signature doesn't match any known classification in our databases. More concerning, it appears to actively resist analysis. My equipment didn't just fail to classify her DNA, it suggested that her genetic structure shouldn't be able to exist according to known biological principles." "Shouldn't be able to exist how?" Admiral Vashi asked. "Well," Dr. Moran said, clearly struggling with the explanation, "imagine if someone built a starship using blueprints from 5 different engineering traditions that contradict each other, but somehow the ship not only flies, it flies better than anything we've ever designed. That's what her DNA looks like." There was a moment of silence as everyone processed this information. Judge Quintara was the first to speak. "Are we dealing with a potential security threat?" "Unknown," Commander Marley replied. "The subject has been completely cooperative. No hostile behavior, no attempts to resist detention, no demands or threats. She seems more interested in the quality of our food service than in her current situation." As if summoned by his words, my comm unit chirped with an internal call. Quartermaster. This is Amy. I don't suppose you could send up some of that Centaurian herb tea. I've heard wonderful things about it, and this seems like a good time to try new things. The entire room stared at my comm unit. Judge Quintara raised an eyebrow. She's calling you directly, Admiral Vashi asked. Apparently, ma'am. The detention quarters have standard communication access. And she's ordering tea? It would appear so, ma'am. Admiral Vashi rubbed her temples in a gesture that transcended species barriers. This is either the most elaborate infiltration attempt in galactic history, or we're dealing with something completely outside our understanding. That's when the second wave of chaos arrived. My comm unit buzzed again, this time with an external priority message. Admiral Vashi, this is Admiral Drawhorn of the Fifth Fleet. We've received reports of a Code Yellow situation. My battle group is en route to provide support. Admiral Vashi's expression shifted from confused irritation to something approaching alarm. Admiral Drawhorn, this is a contained situation. Military intervention is not necessary at this time. With respect, Admiral, reports indicate you have an unclassifiable biological entity in custody. Fifth Fleet protocols require immediate response to potential xenobiological threats. The room went very quiet. Admiral Drawhorn was known throughout the fleet for his direct approach to problem-solving. His idea of support typically involved enough firepower to sterilize a small moon. Admiral, Judge Quintara interjected, the subject is currently contained and showing no hostile intent. She's ordering room service. Room service? Yes, sir. Centaurian herb tea. Specifically. Another pause. Are you telling me this unclassifiable threat is having an afternoon tea break? That appears to be an accurate assessment, sir. Meanwhile, throughout the station, word was spreading faster than a reactor containment breach. I could see it in the way station personnel were behaving, hushed conversations, nervous glances, the kind of barely controlled panic that occurs when people realize something completely unprecedented is happening right under their noses. The Andromedan tourists were having a field day, broadcasting live updates to their social networks about the mysterious impossible being currently enjoying premium accommodations on Omega 7. The Centaurian diplomat had filed 3 separate complaints about the delay to his schedule, apparently unaware that his transportation concerns had become somewhat irrelevant given the circumstances. Most concerning was the reaction of the other species in the area. Beings who had lived through the Void Wars, who had survived first contact with hostile civilizations, who had dealt with cosmic horror that would make lesser species gibber in terror. These beings were nervous, not panicked, exactly, but displaying the kind of careful awareness that suggested their instincts were telling them something very important was happening. My comm unit chirped again. This time it was Dr. Moran's assistant. Dr. Moran, we've got a problem. The subject's detention quarters are receiving approximately 200 incoming communications requests per hour. News services, research institutions and what appears to be several different intelligence agencies are all trying to make contact. Dr. Maroon looked at Admiral Vashi. Word is getting out. How much word? Sir, there are currently 17 different conspiracy theories circulating on the Galactic Information Network. 3 of them involve time travel, 5 suggest she's an artificial intelligence in biological form, and 1 claims she's actually a very sophisticated hologram with substance abuse issues. Amy's voice came through my comm unit again, cheerful as ever. Hey Quartermaster. I hate to be a bother, but there's a reporter from Galactic News Network trying to interview me through the window. Should I talk to them, or is this one of those no-comment situations? Admiral Vashi stood up slowly. Quintara, I want a complete communications blackout on this situation. Nobody talks to anybody about anything until we figure out what we're dealing with. Understood, Admiral. And someone please tell our impossible guest that we'll get her that tea, but maybe she could avoid giving interviews until we sort this out. Yes, ma'am. As the meeting broke up, I couldn't help but notice that Admiral Vashi looked like someone who had started her day expecting routine administrative duties and was now dealing with a situation that threatened to redefine everything the galaxy thought it knew about biology, security and apparently room service standards. And somewhere in the back of my mind, A little voice was suggesting that this was only the beginning. After 6 hours of increasingly frantic meetings, failed scans, and what I can only describe as organized governmental panic, Amy Kowalski finally received her proper Earth coffee. Not the synthetic approximation that most stations served, but actual coffee beans imported from Earth at considerable expense and prepared according to precise human specifications. The transformation was immediate and slightly terrifying. "Oh, that's much better," Amy said, taking a long sip and visibly relaxing. "You know, I was starting to think you all were trying to torture information out of me with that synthetic stuff. But this is the real deal." She settled into her chair with the satisfaction of someone who had just achieved perfect contentment. "Right then, you wanted an explanation." We were back in conference room Alpha, though the assembly had grown considerably. Admiral Vashi, Commander Mali, Dr. Maureen, and Judge Quintara had been joined by General Krafnog, a grizzled Altelian military strategist who looked like he'd been carved from living granite and had seen enough warfare to make a black hole nervous. The general had arrived with Admiral Drahorn's fleet and insisted on attending what he termed this biological anomaly briefing. "Ms. Kowalski," Admiral Vashi began carefully, "we'd appreciate any information you can provide about why our scanning equipment is unable to classify your species." Amy took another sip of coffee and seemed to consider her words. "Well, the short answer is that I'm human. The longer answer is that humans are, let's say, we're complicated." "You mentioned that before," I said. "Could you be more specific about this complexity?" "Sure." Amy set down her coffee cup and leaned forward slightly. "How much do you know about human history?" Dr. Moran consulted his datapad. "Standard galactic records indicate humans achieved spaceflight approximately 2 centuries ago, established first contact protocols roughly 150 years ago, and have since become active participants in galactic commerce and diplomacy." "Right, that's the official timeline," Amy agreed. "But what those records don't mention is what humans have been doing during that time period. See, we have this habit." "What kind of habit?" Judge Quintara asked, though her tone suggested she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Amy's expression brightened. "We collect things. Not just objects, mind you. We collect experiences, knowledge, techniques, and occasionally, useful biological traits from other species." The room went very quiet. General Krafnog leaned forward, his stone-like features shifting into what might have been concern or indigestion. "When you say collect biological traits," Admiral Vashi said slowly, "you mean genetic modification," Amy said cheerfully. "Self-directed, carefully researched, completely voluntary genetic modification. Humans have been incorporating beneficial DNA sequences from other species for about a century now. It started small, just little improvements here and there, better immune systems, enhanced healing factors, improved sensory capabilities. But we're naturally curious, and once we've figured out how to safely integrate alien genetic material," she spread her hands in a gesture that somehow conveyed both innocence and complete inevitability. "You've been deliberately altering your own species?" Dr. Moran asked, his voice climbing toward panic. "Not altering," Amy corrected, "improving. Humans have always been adaptable, but this just takes that adaptation to its logical conclusion. Why limit ourselves to the genetic lottery we were born with when the universe is full of fascinating biological solutions to common problems?" General Krafnog made a sound like a landslide, having second thoughts. "What kind of solutions?" Amy began counting on her fingers. "Well, we've incorporated Regelian cellular regeneration sequences for faster healing, Centaurian neural enhancements for improved pattern recognition, Andromedine metabolic efficiency upgrades for better energy processing, Alterian bone density improvements for increased durability." She paused and looked directly at the general. "Your people have remarkably sturdy skeletal structures, by the way. Very useful for humans who work in high-gravity environments." The general's stone-like complexion somehow managed to become several shades paler. "You're telling us," Judge Quintara said carefully, "that humans have been systematically incorporating genetic material from multiple species?" "Oh, not just multiple," Amy said, with obvious pride. At last count, the average modern human carries beneficial genetic sequences from approximately 47 different species. I personally have traits from 53 species, though I admit I'm a bit of an overachiever. Dr. Moran's datapad slipped from his suddenly nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. 53 species? That's impossible. Genetic incompatibility alone should what? Amy asked, genuinely curious. Kill me? Drive me insane? Cause me to spontaneously combust? Trust me, we ran all the simulations. Humans are remarkably good at making incompatible things work together. It's kind of our specialty. Admiral Vashi was rubbing her temples again, this time with both hands. This explains why our scanners can't classify you. You're not just human anymore. You're what are you? Amy considered this question seriously. I suppose the technical term would be Human Plus. Or maybe Human Deluxe Edition. We haven't really settled on official terminology yet. Most of us just call ourselves human because, fundamentally, that's what we still are. We've just added some accessories. Accessories, Commander, Marley repeated flatly. Enhanced reflexes from Klenian shock troops, improved lung capacity from high-altitude Arcturian mountain dwellers, enhanced digestive efficiency from vegan alkaline specialist, electromagnetic sensitivity from the crystal-based life forms in the Horsehead Nebula. Amy ticked off each modification like she was reading a shopping list. Oh, and I've got the night vision package from Nocturnian cave dwellers. That one's particularly handy for reading in low light. General Krafnog had gone completely silent, which in an Altarian military commander was roughly equivalent to screaming in terror. His stone-like features had frozen in an expression that suggested his worldview was undergoing catastrophic structural failure. Miss Kowalski, Admiral Vichy said, her voice carefully controlled, how many humans have undergone these modifications? Amy shrugged. Most of them? I mean, it's not mandatory or anything. Some people prefer the classic human experience, but the majority of humans you'll encounter these days have at least basic enhancements. It's become pretty standard. Standard? Judge Quintara repeated. Sure. When you're exploring the galaxy and meeting all these fascinating species with useful abilities, it seems wasteful not to learn from them. Humans have always been good at adapting and adopting the best ideas from other cultures. This is just the biological extension of that tendency. Dr. Moran had retrieved his datapad and was frantically running calculations. If what you're saying is true, then every human we've encountered, every human in our databases, every human we think we understand, is probably carrying genetic modifications from dozens of species. Yeah, Amy confirmed. I'm surprised it took this long for someone to notice, honestly. But then again, most species don't really look that closely at each other's biology. Humans do, but we're weird that way. General Krafnog finally found his voice. You're saying that humans have been walking around the galaxy as living composite organisms, and nobody noticed? Amy nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Though to be fair, we weren't trying to hide it. We just didn't think it was particularly noteworthy. From our perspective, we're still human. We just happen to be better versions of human. The general swayed slightly in his chair. For a being made of living rock, this was approximately equivalent to a complete nervous breakdown. General? Admiral Vashi asked with concern. I need to sit down, General Krofnog mumbled. You are sitting down, sir, Commander Marley pointed out. Then I need to lie down, preferably somewhere dark. For several cycles. Amy looked around the table with genuine sympathy. You know, this reaction is pretty typical. Most species get a bit overwhelmed when they find out. But honestly, we're still the same humans you've been dealing with all along. We just happen to be slightly more durable, efficient, and generally improved versions of ourselves. She picked up her coffee cup again. The real question is, why did it take you this long to figure it out? That question hung in the air like a plasma charge about to discharge. Admiral Vichy exchanged glances with Judge Quintara, both clearly realizing that Amy's casual inquiry had just opened an entirely new can of space worms. What do you mean? Why did it take us this long? Dr. Moran asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't entirely sure he wanted the answer. Amy's expression shifted slightly. becoming more thoughtful. Well, humans haven't exactly been subtle about helping out around the galaxy. We just haven't been advertising it either. She reached into her travel bag and pulled out a small data device. Mind if I show you something? Without waiting for permission, she activated the device, projecting a holographic display that filled half the conference room. The display showed a complex timeline spanning the last century, marked with hundreds of data points, incident reports, and what appeared to be detailed biological analyses. This, Amy said, gesturing to the display, is a partial record of human involvement in galactic biological enhancement projects. The timeline was staggering. Crisis after crisis, plague after plague, genetic bottleneck after genetic bottleneck, all resolved by what the official records listed as spontaneous evolutionary adaptation, or unexplained biological recovery. Amy pointed to a data cluster from 30 years ago. The Regalian silicon plague. Humans developed the cure. We just made sure it looked like your scientists discovered it themselves. Another gesture highlighted a more recent entry. The Centaurian fertility crisis 15 years back. Human genetic engineers fixed the chromosome incompatibility issue. Again, we let your medical teams take the credit. You've been interfering with natural evolutionary processes, Judge Quintara asked, though her tone suggested she was still processing the implications. Helping, Amy corrected firmly. We've been helping. There's a difference between interference and assistance. When the Alturian crystal miners started developing lung crystallization from extended exposure to silicon dust, we didn't impose a solution. We simply made sure that Dr. Zerthak happened to stumble across the right combination of respiratory treatments during his research. General Kraftnog, who had been slowly recovering from his earlier shock, suddenly snapped to attention. Dr. Zerthak's breakthrough. That saved millions of lives. You're saying humans were behind that? Behind it, beside it, underneath it, with a safety net, Amy said with a shrug. Humans have this thing about watching other species suffer when we could easily help. We just prefer to do it quietly. The holographic display shifted, showing a new set of data. This time it was genetic analysis charts, but unlike anything I'd ever seen before, where normal DNA analysis showed simple species-specific patterns, these charts looked like someone had created a biological symphony using genetic material from across the galaxy. This is why your scanners couldn't classify me, Amy explained. Modern human DNA doesn't just contain genetic modifications from other species, it contains traces of genetic material from every species we've ever helped. Think of it as biological thank you notes. Dr. Moran was staring at the display with the expression of someone whose entire understanding of genetics was being rewritten in real time. You're telling me that human DNA functions as a repository for galactic biological diversity? More or less, Amy agreed. Every time we help a species overcome a biological challenge, we learn from their solutions. And every time we learn, we incorporate that knowledge into our own genetic framework. Not for conquest or domination, but for preservation and understanding. That's when my comm unit buzzed with an incoming transport notification. Admiral Vesey, this is docking control. We have an incoming diplomatic vessel requesting immediate clearance. The manifest lists the passenger as Brandon Torres, human cultural attaché. Admiral Vesey looked at Amy, who was grinning with obvious delight. You called for backup. I sent a message when I first got here, Amy admitted. Figured someone from the diplomatic corps should probably handle the official explanations. Brandon's much better at the formal stuff than I am. 20 minutes later, Brandon Torres arrived in Conference Room Alpha, and I immediately understood what Amy meant about formal explanations. Where Amy had the casual confidence of someone comfortable in any situation, Brandon carried himself with the polished assurance of someone who dealt with galactic politics as a profession. He was also, I noted with growing unease, approximately 2 meters tall and moved with the kind of fluid grace that suggested significant physical enhancements. Admiral Vesey, Brandon said with a perfectly calibrated diplomatic smile, I apologize for any confusion my colleague may have caused. Amy has a tendency to be direct about these matters. Mr. Torres, Admiral Vesey replied carefully, Ms. Kowalski has been explaining some rather remarkable things about human biology and galactic involvement. Brandon glanced at Amy's holographic display and nodded approvingly. Ah, she's given you the full presentation. Excellent. That should save some time. He turned back to the assembled officials. Yes, everything Amy has told you is accurate. Humans have been actively involved in galactic biological assistance programs for the better part of a century. Assistance programs, Commander Marley repeated, as if testing the words. We prefer to think of ourselves as biological consultants, Brandon explained with good humor, though I suppose genetic guardian angels wouldn't be entirely inaccurate. Humans have this unfortunate tendency to adopt every species we meet. It's really quite embarrassing from a diplomatic standpoint. General Krafnog had found his voice again. You've been treating the entire galaxy like some sort of biological charity project? Not charity, Amy interjected. Family. Humans don't help other species because we feel sorry for them. We help because once we meet you, you become part of our extended family, and humans take care of family. Brandon nodded seriously. It's actually become something of a problem in our diplomatic circles. Human ambassadors keep adopting the cultures they're supposed to be negotiating with. We have standing orders to rotate diplomatic staff regularly to prevent excessive emotional attachment. Excessive emotional attachment, Judge Quintara said slowly, to entire civilizations. It's a human thing, Brandon said apologetically. We get attached to things, people, places, species, entire galactic regions. Then we start wanting to help, and before you know it, we're running secret biological enhancement programs across half the galaxy. Dr. Moran had been quietly running calculations on his data pad. He looked up with an expression of scientific awe mixed with existential terror. If what you're saying is true, then human DNA should contain genetic markers from everyone, every species in the galactic community. Amy and Brandon exchanged a look. Well, Amy said, there's really only one way to find out for sure. She stood up and walked over to the conference room's built-in scanner, the same model that had started this entire mess hours earlier. Dr. Moran, would you mind running one more scan? But this time, instead of trying to classify my species, just run a comprehensive genetic inventory. List everything you find. Dr. Moran's hands trembled slightly as he activated the scanner. The familiar blue light swept across Amy's palm, the analysis protocols engaged, and this time the scanner didn't malfunction. Instead, it began displaying an ever-growing list of genetic markers, species identifiers, and biological signatures. The list scrolled across the screen for nearly 5 full minutes, encompassing genetic material from species across known space. Finally, the scanner completed its analysis and displayed its conclusion. Species, human enhanced, genetic composition, 84-7 confirmed species markers, classification, everything and more, threat level, protective, recommended action, appreciation. The room fell completely silent. Admiral Vashi stared at the display, then at Amy, then back at the display. Everything and more, she said quietly. Amy smiled, that same knowing smile she'd worn when this whole situation began. We told you humans were complicated. Brandon straightened his diplomatic jacket. Now then, Admiral, shall we discuss how to properly thank a species that's been secretly taking care of the entire galaxy for the past century? Because I have a feeling this conversation is just getting started. And for the first time since this impossible day began, I found myself smiling too. Because sometimes,